Three of us are going to share that. Then we'll move into discussion, questions, and answers. Then we'll talk about next steps, and what's not on your agenda is closing in prayer. That's always part of the church meeting. So as soon as Dan is ready, we will start with the PowerPoint. Are you ready? And then Sammy will do part, and I will do part, and then we'll move into questions.
So my role is to tell you about what a community land trust is. For those who were in the previous meeting, this is a bit of a repeat, but we thought it good just to summarize that for the benefit of anyone who's not been in that meeting. And since this is a fairly new concept for a lot of people, it doesn't hurt to repeat that. And let me just say from the outset, I learned about community land trust as a result of my work with Square One Villages, which is a community land trust. And for several years, this idea has just been in the back of my mind, thinking about, is there a way we can make this work for the church? So a community land trust are nonprofits. They exist to hold land in trust for the community. It's just what the name says, for the benefit of the community, for a common good. And the way it works is basically, in most community land trusts, you separate the building from the land. The land trust owns the land, and then other groups can own the building. In our case, where actually the land trust is going to own the building, but it could be set up differently. And then whoever is in the building has a long-term lease, typically 99 years, because that's the longest you can have under the law, with the land trust. So in our case then, the church will have a lease with the land trust for use of this building. Think of it as we would be making a contribution of somewhere in the neighborhood of $4.5–5 million, the value of the donation to the land trust, to this land trust as a lease payment. All right, so that basically we are paying our lease for the next 99 years. And then the land trust is made up of members in the community that represent the community. Typically, in most cases, land trusts have 1/3 of their representation from the people they serve. So in Square One's case, and this is very common in affordable housing land trusts, 1/3 of the board is made up of residents of the housing projects. In other cases where the land trust has a different purpose, is serving, nature conservancy, for instance. You could hold a land trust for preserving, a watershed. Then it might be 1/3 comes from people who live in specifically in that area, or in some other way are stakeholders. And this land trust, the way you set it up then, you define in its bylaws who those members of that board will be. And so in our case, anyone who makes a sizable donation of property to the land trust, such as us, will be represented on the board of directors of the land trust, but a minority, so not the majority, so typically 1/3. There are, as I say, a lot of land trusts that are affordable housing, and that's what they're most known for. But land trusts, as in this wonderful quote from the International Center for Community Land Trusts, are not just for affordable housing. As they say, CLTs have also been applied to many non-residential projects, including neighborhood parks, community gardens, commercial buildings, community service centers, urban agriculture, and family farms. So you can basically have a land trust for any community good. And that is what we are proposing for this particular community. So Sammy is going to talk a little bit more then about the mission and purpose of the land trust.
Great, thank you, Dan. Before I touch the mission, and vision, actually, I think it's really important to go back to how did this group, the congregation, land on the idea of community land trust. And as many of you know, much better than I, this has been a multi-year process, starting with a building committee. So one of the things that did and has come up, of course, is that we cannot really afford the care of this building. There is an endowment, which is something we're going to talk about today, but even the size of that endowment, a little over $2 million, doesn't really cover the biggest public need for this building, which is a seismic upgrade to essentially withstand a potential earthquake. So that's one of the glaring factors in moving forward for the congregation, that we can't really afford this space. And if we look at this space, it's also maybe underutilized with the size of our congregation. I think we're a healthy size of congregation and going strong, but I think there's plenty of other space in this building that can be maybe utilized in a different way. Build rooms that are sitting empty, and if we're going to heat them, then they should be used for something. And then another point here on how we've landed on the CLT is that really a donation aligns with our mission. Am I on the right slide here? Yeah, okay. That giving, essentially, really does fit the mission and the ministry of First Christian Church. So then if we go to a couple more points here, essentially the building committee and others have... Okay. Hopefully this doesn't... I got a big play button here. Dan, where did Dan go? Okay. Oh, okay. I hope we're still good. But one of the best options for us to not just remain in the building, but have maybe a firm foot in the new building ownership. I think that's really important here. Some of the other alternatives that we've looked at, like say selling the building or donating the building to another religious organization, that may eventually push us out, or we may feel marginalized, where we see this option as a really good option for us to make up 1/3 of this board, to have a say in this organization in perpetuity. And then the 99-year lease really helps the deal too, I think. Let's see. Okay, yeah, the slides aren't the same as up here, so I'm going to have to turn around a little bit to look at this. But this is also potentially seen as a community benefit. We're right here at the heart of Eugene, and we already benefit the community so much by our positioning here. And then making sure that this building is utilized by the community of Eugene in different ways also seems to fit our own mission and vision. Dan, I might need your help here to get back to the slides. Oh, you're on it. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. And then, so we also see this as a viable way to maintain the building, the structure of the building in the future. So this is sort of how we've landed on the CLT, and then the CLT task force has taken upon to really see if this is going to work. So next slide, Dan, we'll look at the vision, essentially, of this historic land trust. The vision, as you might see, is a little bit open, preserving Eugene's historic places as living landmarks to be open, welcoming, and alive with community purpose for future generations to come. So there's a little bit more breadth there than just this building, so we're being potentially more inclusive for other properties in the future, and not just this building. So the vision is a little bit wide, and then if we go to the mission, next slide there, the mission, which is a little bit lengthy, the title of this community land trust, at least what we've proposed for the Articles of Incorporation with Oregon, is the Historic Eugene Community Land Trust is dedicated to preserving, protecting, and revitalizing historic buildings and culturally significant sites in Eugene, Oregon, for the benefit of the public. Through community stewardship, inclusive collaboration, and sustainable practices, we can ensure that these architectural treasures, which we're sitting in today, remain vibrant, accessible spaces that celebrate our shared heritage here in Eugene, and then foster civic engagement and serve as lasting resources for education, creativity, and community life. it's a real opportunity, I think, that we have here to make sure that our doors are open for the rest of the Eugene community to also engage in this historic building. So a few last points here. The CLT task force, will essentially be transferring into that 1/3 makeup of the board. Now, not all the members of the task force are ready and willing to do that, but of course, some members of this task force, we do plan on staying involved in being a part of the board of directors of this task force. And as a part of that, we are submitting for the Articles of Incorporation with Oregon to have our title and president and secretary of this upcoming board. So we're moving along and getting started. Then I'd also like to acknowledge that we're going to need more help, right? This has been a task force, but of course, if we all intend on making sure that our voice makes up 1/3 of this future organization, we need our voices involved. And so Sunny B has been interested in stepping up to the task force. And as we move into the new year, I'd also, you can contact Lori or I from the task force if you'd like to be interested moving forward. Okay. And then I'll also say, as a sort of personal side note, it's my experience I helped start the organization Friends of the Owyhee in Eastern Oregon about 10 years ago, a nonprofit land conservation organization. And it was my experience that a starting fund is extremely important to the success of a nonprofit organization, as you might imagine. So I think that kind of allows us to start the next conversation, that if the Community Land Trust is really going to work for the historic preservation of this building that we would like to be in, it really needs our support. So next part of the conversation is discuss the parking lot and endowment fund. Lori? I think Dan's just gonna.
Yeah, hopefully he's pressing the button. So when you think about what we own this building, we own the parking lot behind us, and we have a large endowment that was gifted years ago that we've been managing carefully, and it comes with interests that are earned. So we have those other resources. So should we decide to go ahead and give the building to the Community Land Trust, of which they would be the owner and they would manage every part of the building, we still have our parking lot and we have our endowment fund. This is probably one of the biggest decisions, in addition to giving the building away. What are we going to do with the parking lot? Are we going to give it to them? Are we going to keep it? And are we going to keep our endowment? Or are we going to give them part of it for startup? About a month ago, we had an expanded CLT task force where we invited the 2 co-moderators, the treasurer, the past treasurer, and Linda Bright, who still does a lot of financial management. And we invited them to an extended discussion where we debated and discussed the parking lot issue and the endowment issue. So we have included what I call more brains in the conversation. And as the task force that's been meeting for 9 months, it's our belief that we should keep the parking lot and give a portion of the endowment and some of the parking lot revenue for a short amount of time. So in regards to the parking lot, do we have the slide up here? One reason that we would like to keep the parking lot is that it's an ongoing source of guaranteed income. I don't know how much of you shop on Willamette Street, but there are 5 thrift stores, there's a really hip coffee shop, there's a restaurant, and it's actually a popular place to be, and there's very little parking. So people park in our lot when they're doing business on Willamette Street. As a former City of Eugene Planning and Development Department employee, I was in conversations constantly about Willamette Street and wanting Willamette Street to have a lot of business. And the parking lot that we own contributes to that economic development. So would we keep it? If we were to keep it, which is the opinion of the task force, we're still in the game of the community on something that we own, and we're getting ongoing revenue. In addition, we would still own one piece of real property if we kept that parking lot for our management. And then a third possibility is that if we needed to, we would have that spot that we could build, or there could be other development opportunities that we could be involved in. So that is our reasons for keeping the parking lot. And Dan, You know, I don't know if you know, but Dan's a musician. He's in like 10 places at once. So now he's going to come back down here. And I wanted him to cover this area because he proposed an idea to us that we discussed as a task force, and he's the most competent to explain it. So he will be doing that.
So as Lori says, the task force is recommending that we share the building endowment. That endowment currently is about $2.3 million. It has accumulated over time, largely through bequests, the biggest of which was the Pierce estate, and over half of that endowment comes from that single estate. And those gifts were given, and typically in those estate gifts, and I know this for a fact for the Pierce estate, it just simply said to First Christian Church. We developed a bequest policy back in the 90s. Jessie Bork, a few of you still around remember her, was a very big part of that. And the funny thing is when we got her estate, she directed that we not use that policy that she helped write because she wanted her money to be used for program, not for building. At any rate, and so those bequests always went to the building endowment, but it was not specified by the donor. That's the important point. It was determined by the board through that policy of where the gift should go. And that endowment then is only to be used for the maintenance, upkeep, care of the building. And that endowment has been a wonderful gift over many decades for support of the congregation. Well, our recommendation, since that was the intent, and perhaps some people left money in their bequests knowing that that is where it would go, we felt it would be appropriate to share part of this endowment with the Community Land Trust, and we designate, restrict its use accordingly and tell the land trust how they can use that. Whether or not it can be used only for maintenance of the building or whether or not it can be used for any program. That is up to us. We can make that restriction on that gift. But our thought is to give $1 million to the Community Land Trust and to keep then the remainder of about 1.3 for our use, which then we can use either in the future for future development, gives us a little nest egg that we can use, or we can use it to help pay our share of the utilities or other building-related expenses that we share as a leasee. So that's how we plan, or what our recommendation is for using the endowment. And I think, are you going to chair the discussion time then, Lori?
So part of that giving the endowment is that the CLT could use it for their startup. So if you ever think about starting up a new business or starting up a nonprofit, you got to have something. And if you think about it, they won't have an executive director from day one. They're going to have to spend some time recruiting and doing those kinds of things, but they'll need, the board would, but they would need money for that. So now, I don't know, do we have a roving microphone that we can get? But if not, I will have you come up. Now is your opportunity to ask questions, and any member of the task force can answer. Because this will be our last presentation before the vote at the annual meeting in January. So this is your last chance. Dr. Kennedy, my professor from Northwest Christian.
Just something that hasn't been said about the way we split this up, whether they give them the building or the endowment and the fire and the parking lot. My thinking on that is that the endowment is to be used mostly for, and has been for the last, since I was treasurer, on grounds, or it can be used for the purchase of new property or building a new building. Gives us a lot of flexibility with that, but the advantage of taking that and giving it to the CLT and keeping the parking lot is the parking lot is not restricted as to what it can be spent for, and we provide us the opportunity to have the money that's coming in from the parking lot to be used in ways that we haven't been able to use it before because of the way we're structuring this. So I just think it's the best thing going forward. If we do it the other way, then we get stuck with having to spend it in a certain way, and it leaves us open.
Let me share something real quick about the parking lot that came up when we had all the financial brains in the room. If we were to give the CLT our parking lot, right now we're in a really good contract with Diamond Parking that does the majority of the work. And as part of that, we have a good partnership to have the parking lot across the street for Sundays, weddings, funerals, and every other event, Christmas, Easter. So if we were to give them the parking lot as a possibility, then that partnership with Diamond completely changes, and so does our control for our Sundays, Wednesdays, any ceremony we have. So part of that is keeping the partner, if we were to keep it, is we keep our partnership with Diamond, which is working really well. Glenn McCarroll.
I think now that one of the big expenses of our building is the insurance on the building. I wondered if that would be split and we'd still have to pay a portion of that, or if we'd be out of responsibility for that.
Those kinds of details we're still working out, and we're working out a budget. We'll set up the first year's budget, but once the CLT is formed, it's up to them. Currently, the budget we have has the CLT paying all of the property insurance because they own the building. We would contribute to the utilities because we're using those utilities. But those are some details that will still have to be worked out. And particularly when we bring in some community members that aren't church members and get their view of things and how they see things, they might see things a little bit differently. But that'll be part of the negotiation with the board. Darlene?
How does that affect the food hut that we have on the parking lot?
Yeah, so one of the things that we can do, we will have a lease, a ground lease with the Community Land Trust. Lease, we will define things that protect us, and some things will be in the bylaws. But one of the things we can put in there, for instance, is that we will have use of the building or the part of, the building, particularly for Helping Hearts, any things that we're doing to assist our low-income neighbors will be part of the lease agreement.
Tiffany's got her hand up in back. We're going to be really strict about what we put in there, about what we want before we give it to you.
My question is, do we have people who are willing to be, I know it was said there are a couple people who are willing to be on the board because we're going to have a 1/3 ownership of the board, it sounds like. I'm just wondering if we have enough people already saying, yes, I'm willing to go and do that, because that seems like a pretty big responsibility. And I just wanted to make sure we have that in place. And also, I don't quite understand how, if we give the church to the Community Land Trust and we have this 99-year lease, are we paying monthly on that lease? Or is it just, oh, we gave you the church and so we get to be here and we don't have to pay any lease money? And then there's that whole thing about like, oh, we have utilities we're going to be paying. So what expenses are we going to have as a congregation? And which ones are we not going to have that we do currently? Those are some of my questions.
So right now we have 5 people on the Community Land Trust Task Force. We're adding Sunny Bedeluan in January, so we'll have 6. Of those 6 people, I can guarantee you that any of us would like to have that one of the board seats. So of the 6 people on the current task force, I can guarantee you that any one of us would want that board slot. But we haven't even gone through the process of discussing this with the First Christian Church Board yet. So that the First Christian Church Board is going to have some say in who's going to get those seats. And we haven't figured out how that selection process will be made in a fair way. So that should answer the first part of your question.
Well, she was asking about community members, and we have ideas on community members, but we haven't approached anyone yet. So that will be one of our next tasks.
And the other, did you hear the other part of the question?
Yes, about finances.
So we have gone through 2 mock budgets, thanks to Donna and Dan, because they both have that Square One Village background. So they've been running spreadsheets of potential CLT budget, potential First Christian budget. These are just like models. They're not final things. Would you like to add to that discussion, Dan?
Your question was about whether or not we will have to pay a lease, but yes, we will have prepaid the lease. So the question is, in making a $4.5 million contribution, what does that buy us? We're suggesting it buys us 99 years. But it could be that then if the Land Trust Board agrees to that, then after that 99 years, we might have to then contribute, or we can ask the Land Trust to continue to provide, once every 10 years, we can renegotiate the terms and we can extend it for another 99 years, but that would be up to the Board of the Land Trust to make that determination. So yeah, there's no guarantee that we would continue to have essentially rent-free in perpetuity, but for at least in that initial period.
But if you think about our church budget, FTEs, so I ran budgets for the city for 20 years. If you think about a budget, usually the staffing is a big part of that budget. So we will no longer need a facility manager. The Community Land Trust will run that. We might share reception, front desk phone calls. We may have the ability to share that with the Community Land Trust, or maybe it's a half and half type person. None of these details have been worked out, but if you think about FTE, we aren't going to need the same number of FTE that we had before because we're not managing the building. FTE means full-time equivalency.
Point of clarification, Sunny said something about you're preparing the paperwork to submit to the state for recognition or to make it right. And in that paperwork, you are naming a chair of the board and a secretary of the board. So who makes a decision on who those two people?
Currently, it's just the Land Trust,
So-
the task force, but it could be the board.
I
or someone
don't
else.
think that it should, my opinion, it should not be committee decision. It needs to be a church decision.
Yeah. I mean, we had to put somebody's name in it just to file the paperwork, but we can change it anytime.
All that does is create the nonprofit status with the state.
Yeah.
So once that is set up, we can change anything we want to.
Yeah, and I think, I agree with you. I think it would be good for either the board or some other body to determine that. That's absolutely fine.
Right here, Dan. There we go. Carl.
Dick?
I have a couple of questions. I didn't quite understand when you talked about the third of membership on the board for the trust. What is the design of the other 2/3? And is there a category of that that's clear? That's one question I have.
Yeah, typically it's 1/3 of just broad community members and another third for stakeholders. But we haven't necessarily identified any stakeholders. We could. So we could, for instance, we could reserve that 1/3 for, say, if we wanted to have representation from Native American tribes, people of color, so on and so forth, we could reserve that 1/3 for a category. Or otherwise, it's just 2/3 from the community. The one other possibility that we discussed with the mayor a little bit was, would the city have any particular strong interest in becoming a member, in which case then 1/3 could be appointed by the city council. But I don't think they do, so that's probably not going to happen. So either just 2/3 from the community at large or some other stakeholder group that we identify. Yeah, follow up?
Who decides that? You talk about we, as if we, the congregation, that we make up the original membership of all thirds, huh?
Yeah, no. Well, on the initial board, when it is formed, so part of the process is we'll have to recruit some community members to be on that initial board when it's formed. But we determine the bylaws at this point until that board comes into fruition. Once that board exists, then they own it. So they could tweak it But we will set that up. We make that determination. We recruit those community members. So if it's a 6-person board, that means we have 4 people out of the community we need to recruit. If it's 9, then that's 6 people we need to recruit from the community. Yeah, the task force is working on the bylaws, absolutely. We are working with an attorney, a nonprofit attorney, David Atkins, and he has a template that he uses for this purpose. We'll start with that template, we'll tweak it, and that's what we'll bring back to the congregation, hopefully by the January meeting, so you know precisely what's in the bylaws. Yeah. No, we have that done. He says it takes about 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, so we should have that done so the congregation on it.
Just to provide you some assurance, the task force is made up of people that are very aware of church policy. I personally have read the manual back and forth about 20 times at least. We're not going to violate any church policies in the formation of the next steps. We also plan to communicate with you as much as possible. We will have more town halls if we need to, through emails and the newsletter and the bulletin. Communication is a strong value of mine personally. Sammy will be taking over the chair of the committee in January, but I will stay on the committee. And one of my pet peeves about church is when people don't find out about things when they need to find out about things. So we will keep that value going. Nobody will be blindsided. I promise you.
My question is about the process. Like, okay, let's say it passes the board, we all agree, let's go for it, CLT. And you're done applying for the nonprofit, etc. Like, does the board of the Community Land Trust seek other Eugene historic buildings to become part of this thing? I don't understand how this works.
It's up to that board. They could. My assumption would be they're going to have their hands full with this building. So the first couple of years, they're going to concentrate on this. But in time, there might be other historic properties. And then we have this board. Yes. And then so again, if that happens, and that's part of what we'd write into the bylaws, that in order to have voting status on the board, you have to make a minimum donation of, set your value, 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, whatever the case is. So if another property comes in and they've made a contribution equal to ours, then we would have to share that board membership with them.
And in terms of money, there will be an account where people in the community can donate?
Sure, of course. Yeah, in fact, we have our first $50 donation that was made, as Eliza knows, that someone heard about this and wanted to make a donation. So yes, there will be set up a bank account for that purpose. And, yeah. Yep.
2 questions. Would First Christian Church be bound by the current restrictions on use of the endowment funds that remain for it, and can that policy be changed? And secondly, what happens if the CLT is unsuccessful at raising the necessary funds to care for and maintain the building? And what would happen if the CLT folded?
That's you.
So in terms of the second question, part of what the bylaws will say, if the CLT folds, it reverts back to the church. And if the church folds, it goes to the denomination. So we protect our interests in that way. The first question was the restrictions. Yes. So my understanding is that the building endowment is board restricted. It was a board policy. Therefore, the board can do anything they want with it. Now, it's generally, all the guidance I've received over the years, you don't want to make willy-nilly changes to your endowment because people won't trust you, right? But the board has that ability to determine how that endowment is used. We can restrict it in giving it to the CLT, though. We're now the donor of it, yeah. Nancy.
I'm not even quite sure how to ask this question, but I understand the CLT model for Square One villages, because it's like you built, you worked with a church and I guess you still own the land and you built the buildings on it. So you had a need for what you wanted to do when you entered into this CLT with the church. How do you figure out, I mean, this board that you put together, do they have some interest in doing something with the building? I mean, do you understand what I'm saying? It's like, yeah, who's going to want it?
Think about it this way. So Square One Villages has board members that are community members who don't live in their properties. Why serve on that board? It's because they share an interest in the mission of the organization. So the question is, are there community members out there who share in the mission of this community land trust of preserving historic buildings for a community good? And it's finding then those people who say, yeah, I think that's really an important mission. So I'll just tell you this one story that part of this, the germ of this idea, was when they were tearing down the city hall. All right, most of us here remember that. And Otto Pacheca, an architect who from the University of Oregon, launched this campaign to preserve the city hall. And part of the point he was making is Eugene doesn't value its historic buildings. And we need to, this was a landmark building that won national awards, and we should invest what we take to preserve this historic building. And I just think there are many people out there who have that kind of value, who just see the value in historic buildings and would join us in that quest. So that's what we'll have to test out, see if that's true.
This statement may not be 100% accurate, but in my vision and all the discussions I've been on the subject, when I think about the executive director who will be hired to run the Community Land Trust, this building is mostly empty Monday through Saturday. One of their first jobs is to fill it up and to charge money for that. If that new executive director cannot fill the building and charge money for that, they probably won't be the right person for the job.
Jerry?
Yes, in 125 years or so, this building has lived through whatever earthquakes Oregon has had. How has it survived it? Has it been damaged badly, or is it really not that big a problem?
So the engineers tell us that when the Cascadia event happens, this building will suffer significant damage. And they say the best they can do is engineer it so that you have time to get out. And then you can deal with it after that. And that, some of those who were part of that, I don't remember that study, said the cost of doing that was what, Matthew? Come down here. And so, yeah, the seismic upgrade is part of the concern. Yes, we've endured everything since 1911, but we've not, a Cascadia event happens about once every 300 to every 500 years, and we're overdue for it. The last one was in 1700, as I remember correctly. So we're overdue for that kind of event.
So when we got the seismic evaluation done in 2019, the cost then was just slightly over $1 million, but once the pandemic happened, the number more than doubled that figure due to labor and material costs going up. So we're probably closer to probably above even the $3 million right now, because it's been about 4 years since we got our last updated bid.
So, and I'll credit our good friend who was in the House of Representatives, and his family has attended here off and on over the years. What is his name? Someone help me, a young guy. Huh? No. Oh, shoot. Any rate, he'll come to me. He called me up when he was only in the House for one term, and he said, I have this idea. He says, I've heard that the church needs this money for a seismic upgrade. What if we went to the Oregon legislature and asked the legislature for $2 million from lottery funds? And I said, gee, that sounds like a great idea. Well, then when he investigated, the lawyers said you can't give that money to a religious institution. You could give it to a community land trust. So I think that would be on the top agenda of the board of the Community Land Trust to start working the community, our legislators, to seek lottery. Now, how do you feel about accepting lottery? Have you all heard me tell this story of the lottery funds? And the Church of Scotland that had this vote of whether or not they were going to accept lottery funds, and it was someone quoting Booth, the Foundation for Salvation Army, says, I'll take money from the devil and wash it in the blood of the Lamb. And that that vote passed by 10 votes out of 1,000 delegates. And I was always convinced that was the reason why. So at any rate, to seek lottery funding or some other source of funding. We also know of a grant possibility. If we put up $250,000, they will match it with $250,000. But we have to come up with that $250,000 in order to get the other $250,000. But at any rate, so things like that to upgrade the building so that we'll survive a Cascadia event.
I'm going to move us to our next agenda item, which will be you, Dan. So I want you to visualize that at the end of January, we have our congregational meeting. We have crafted a very specific vote that gives you all the information you need, but you can answer it with a yes or no. So let's say it's something to the effect of, we will give our church to the Community Land Trust, we will keep our parking lot, we will give them this much money. And all of you vote yes. What happens after that vote is?
So the land trust, so the first step of the land trust is just articles of incorporation, and that is in process. The second step, once we have the articles of incorporation, is to form the board. And then to form the nonprofit, to go to IRS and file papers for the nonprofit. Our attorney will walk us through that entire process. We don't make the donation to the land trust until it exists, right? And until that board exists. So that board has to be created first. The nonprofit has to be established. So that will happen over the next 6 months. Once that is formed and it exists, it has its own board, then it can receive the donation. Then sometime after the board and the congregation votes to move forward, we make that donation. I can't tell you exactly when that would occur, but sometime during probably 26, that we then would officially transfer the property to that land trust. But I think we want to make sure that the land trust is established, has good community members, and that we feel confident in its ability to receive the gift before we make it. So when we take the vote, that's just the first step to move forward. We will still have to make the gift at a later point. And
Abigail has a quick question.
Yeah, well, let me enter this one question that came in from someone watching online because it relates to this. Does the land trust involve only the building, or does it include the lot and grounds? And it would include just the historic building. I mean, this property at 1166 Oak, it will not include the parking lot, is what we're recommending, but it would include the building and the land under it.
Okay, first of all, I think you all have been doing an awesome job, and thank you for all your hard work. I can tell you've done your homework, and I know a lot of the questions are, and I don't know, maybe difficult to answer, so I just want to name that you're doing a fantastic job answering them. And then my question is, knowing, bless you, that there's a high possibility that there will be significant structural damage if the Cascadia quake happens. Are there contingency plans as far as how the building will be used, or what happens if the whole community land trust can no longer use the facility?
No plans. I don't know anyone else want to do, maybe some hopes. But I think the point, again, of making it a community land trust is that it wouldn't just be on us. Now it's something, how much does this community treasure this building? And to rely on the whole community for support. And part of that will, be determined by how well the land trust stewards the building, and the community sees value in it, and they see all these other community events that are being held here and organizations that utilize the building, and therefore will want to rebuild it, and whatever it takes to put it back together. But that's a hope. I can't say it's a plan. Does that answer it or come close to it?
This church is extremely open and affirming in all ways. So giving it away to the Community Land Trust, do we lose that ability to control how this building is used?
That's something we can put into the bylaws. So we put into the bylaws basically our values that maintain that this will continue to be open and affirming. We already have a statement of values that we use for rentals that say that, if you want to rent here, you have to agree to that. So, a Ku Klux Klan group could not rent this building, right? Or an anti-LGBT group. If someone wanted to come here and hold some rally, that would be a violation of our values. So that would be, we would put those into the land trust. Who did? Darlene, did you get your question answered? Did you have another question?
So we are in control of the building and do what we want with the landfill.
Right now we are. Once it's transferred, then the land trust is in control of the building. And our control only comes through our representation on the board. So I want to be honest about that. We would be losing some control.
Are we guaranteed a place to worship? Because we won't be a majority of the board.
Yeah. Again, that's something we put into the lease agreement that guarantees our use of the building. Yep. And existing programs, absolutely. Yep. Yeah, we can put pretty much anything we want. Now, there might be a little bit of negotiation with the board once we get those community members involved. They might say, well, we might have to negotiate with them on that. But no, our intent is that we put in there that these are the, our current use of the building and some future use, that we get so many hours, we get exclusive use of the worship space on Sunday mornings, Helping Hearts, and other things of that nature are part of our lease. Nancy, did you have another?
I was just going to say that really, between Helping Hearts and the Interfaith Food Hub, we pretty much use the entire basement. So thinking about that, is there the potential to lose access to a part of the space as we use it now?
I want to be honest and say there's always potential, but I think it's very small because, again, one of the first things we do is we create that lease agreement that says, and if we determine we need 100% of the basement, we'll put that in the lease agreement. I'm not sure we need quite that much, but we need certain hours to say, we need, and maybe we say we need exclusive use of the parlor, since it'd be pretty hard to move Helping Hearts and any of those other spaces, but we have shared use of the dining room that could be used for other purposes. But yeah, that definitely would be in the lease.
Okay,
I
two
wanna
more
thank
questions
you
and then
for
we're
all
going to
the
move on.
Serious effort, and I know that the best is going to come.
Thank you, Darlene.
Okay, we're going to make this the last question because I'm going to promise to get people out of here.
Sure, appreciate the exercise you're giving me.
Yeah, he's getting it today.
Does a region play a role in any of this?
Region has not played a direct role. I did discuss the concept with our interim regional minister. They will play a role in that they would need to agree to the being included as the who would inherit our rights if we go out of existence. But there is no, what do you call it, there's no clause on our deed that requires involvement of the region. We own it outright. So it's our choice to involve them, but as I say, we would want to have them involved in saying, hey, are you okay with being included in this? And have them look at that. And they might give us some honest feedback, but when I did talk to David, our interim regional minister, he was like, gee, I know a couple other places that could benefit from this idea.
I said that was the last one, but okay, make them fast. We got two more, and then I'm calling the questions.
I think it's. I hear that we figure out initially what to put into our lease agreement about the use of our space. Like we're Helping Hands is we want them to be able to use this, and this, and that, and that, and that. Now, just as an example, this church has never been static. We don't know about Helping Hands for 99 years. There may be different missions that we identify as a congregation, and that mission calls for a different space or a different setup. Like, for example, the kitchen, and the kitchen needs a $100,000 renovation before it can meet the codes to do that mission. But we don't now. So what does the congregation do? Does if we identify something that they feel we're called to mission, and we need to do some changes to the building financially and time-wise and all that stuff, and how does that all work out?
Basically the same way you would if you were leasing a different property, that you would negotiate with the landlord, and that's what we would have to do. If we start up some new ministry that requires additional space that's not currently in the lease, then we negotiate that with the CLT. And they might come back and say, well, that exceeds the value of your contribution, so we think you ought to pay for that. And that would be part of the negotiation. Or it might be, hey, we're not using this as much as we thought we were, and so we want to use this instead. But again, it's just a negotiation process with the Land Trust Board.
Last one to Michael.
Do we keep it Eugene, or can we separate out and get people to be a part of it that are Idaho or someplace else?
You could. I think it was our feeling that we ought to start with Eugene, and if it grows, then the board could always vote to expand and include other properties. But it just made sense let's do something that's manageable with a clear geographical boundary. Like, are there historic buildings in Springfield? Well, yeah, probably. And if they came to the CLT and said, gee, we'd love to be a part of your CLT, well, then it would be up to that board to decide, okay, we're going to include a larger area, but that'd be entirely up to that board.
All right, that's the end of agenda item number 4. I'd like to make 2 quick comments: change management and church. Change management, we're not just going through building issues, we're going through staffing issues, we're going through pastoral issues, and we've gone through a lot more issues in the last 5 years. And the part about change management I like to bring up is acknowledge that we're going through it. Feel the feelings you're having. You're going to have anxiety. You're going to have fears. And a good way to deal with all that is, 1, to talk to each other, call in any member of the CLT, keep asking questions, talk amongst yourselves, get your feelings out. But as a church, we're not just an agency. There's something greater guiding us. We don't have to do this on our own. God is going to decide whether this is going to work out. God is going to decide the future of this church. There's this huge spiritual factor underneath it all. and God is leading us. So I ask everybody to pray all the time, God, what would you have us do? 2026 is going to be a year of change, and we're going to need to depend on God more than we ever did. So please keep talking to each other, keep praying, and I'm going to have Renee come up and pray us out right now.
It almost feels like preaching a second sermon after that, but yes, will you pray with me? Dear loving one, we thank you for this opportunity to learn more about this option for continuing to worship in this building, which is the desire of this congregation. We pray, dear God, that you would make our minds clear, that you would make our hearts sturdy, and that you would make our spirits resilient so that we can make this decision knowing that you are with us and that you are caring for us and helping us to move forward as you would have your church in this place move forward. All this we pray in Jesus' name and for his sake. Amen. And I think you're